Hello, I'm Leslie Kenton, and this is my daughter, Susanna. In this series, we're going to be telling you about a new way of eating we've discovered, which we think is absolutely wonderful. Not only because it makes you look good and helps keep you well, but also because the foods themselves are so beautiful and delicious.
This is a funny cookery series, however, because you're not going to be seeing a lot of cooking. In fact, 75% of the foods we eat are raw.
Today, we thought we'd start at the beginning with breakfast. And the mainstay of any raw energy way of eating in breakfast is a muesli. But I suspect it's a muesli like no muesli you've ever seen before. Because it's a muesli that's based not on only grains, as you will find in the mueslis that you buy in your supermarket counter shelves, but rather on fruits. And you can use almost any fruits you like. Would you like to come and help me cut some up? In fact, muesli originally was created by a Swiss physician called Max Bircher-Benner back in about 1895. Bircher-Benner discovered some rather amazing things. He found that when people that were not well were fed on uncooked foods, they sometimes showed remarkable recoveries. He also found that people that were well when they ate uncooked foods, particularly the fruits and vegetables, could increase their energy levels so that they had a lot of vitality, and also could find that they looked better than they'd ever had before. And his recipe for muesli, from which all of the other recipes that we have now have been taken, was based primarily on any kind of fruit. Now here I'm going to use pears and apples. And of course it does contain grain, and the grain we have is just ordinary porridge oats, which have been soaked overnight. But there's very little grain. I'm going to put about 1 tablespoon of porridge oats per person into the bowl. And the reason we soak them overnight is that when you take a grain and you soak it in water overnight, you begin to break down the starch that's in it. And starch, as you know, can be very difficult for some people to digest, particularly first thing in the morning. It turns the starch into a natural sugar, so that then it's very easily assimilated. You can use almost any kind of fruits for a muesli, fresh fruits, or in the wintertime, when fresh fruits are less available, dried fruits. For instance, I have some here, some sultanas. And what we recommend with dried fruits is that we soak them again overnight, where they plump up. Some dates from which the seeds have been removed. And then they plump up and they make beautiful bases for mueslis. These are pears and some peaches, some fresh figs that have been dried, and some apricots. But today we're going to use just bananas and pears. And I'm going to put them through a food processor. In fact, I'm going to put my pears through. I think I'll cut, would you cut the bananas for me?
Sure.
And you'll find we use a lot of food processors in this series because they're so useful for so many different things. But this can be done by hand. In fact, Susanna, you're going to show us in a few minutes about how to make a bowl using a hand grater. But this muesli that I'm making is for a whole family. And it needs about 1 pear per person. I'm making a family of 4's muesli, so I'm using 4 pears. And about half a banana per person, and I'm using 2 bananas. And I'm going to grate up my pears. Thank you. And indeed, you could grate up the bananas as well, but I find it makes them rather mushy, so I prefer it this way. I'm going to pour my pears into my bowl with my soaked grains.
I've sliced the bananas lengthways twice because they make smaller pieces that way and you chop them across.
That's just about the right size, I think, for the flavor and everything. I'll put those bananas in. Okay. Could you also cut up some cherries for me that maybe we can decorate the top with?
Sure.
Okay. And I'm going to use some soaked raisins that, again, I've soaked overnight. They're lovely and sweet, and you really need very little. extra sweetening for this. If you do want any sweetening, you can add a little bit of honey. Susanna usually drizzles this on. I mix it in. And finally, a little bit of, these are minced nuts, and you'll find we use these a lot in many of our recipes. I'll just mix this up. Okay, I'm ready for your cherries. Now what we have is a breakfast that is light and yet full of energy that is sustaining and will carry you through all day long, and it won't destroy anyone's teeth because it contains no heavy sugars, as do the mueslis that you buy in supermarkets, nor is it difficult to digest. Now, you're probably going to see us use a lot of food processors, and I know that everyone doesn't have one, and indeed most of the things that we make, it's not necessary by any means to own one. But we consider the food processor the mainstay of the raw energy kitchen because you can do so many things with them. I mean, we use our oven very, very seldom, and our hob not very often, but our food processor we use all the time. They come these days in so many different varieties and shapes. It used to be you'd have to pay about 90 or 100 pounds for a good food processor, but now some of the smaller ones you can pick up for 35, 37 pounds, and do look if you want to buy one from shop to shop because they do vary a lot in price. Some of the things you can do with them are quite remarkable. They all come with different blades, these kind of instruments. This blade is for chopping, and we use this a lot, both for making sauces and also for chopping things like nuts and seeds, which we use in many of our recipes. This is the pastry blender. We don't usually make pastry, and I think for people that do make pastry, it's fairly useless as well, but nevertheless, many companies supply them. This is a grater, and most of them come with either a coarse or a fine grater, or both. Very useful for grating raw vegetables for salads or for grating fruit, as we did just now for our muesli. And this is a slicer. And slicers are very good also for making salads because you can get a totally different texture and feel to a vegetable when you actually cut it, like this on a slicer, as opposed to cutting it by knife or using a grater. So while I'm not suggesting anyone rush out and buy a food processor, I think you'll be surprised to see just how many wonderful things one can do with them. And as I say, it's something we would never be without.
Although our muesli doesn't take very long to make,